Welcome to the deep dive. So today our mission is all about the foundations of knowledge. We're moving way beyond the familiar heroic stories of Greek mythology. Put away the gods and the shiny armor for a second.
Right.
We're going to look at how these stories actually served as kind of structural blueprint for understanding science, psychology, and even physical geography.
It's an incredible thing when you realize that we tend to just dismiss these myths as, fantasy.
Sure.
But our sources show that ancients were using these narratives as early systematic models to explain things they actually observed in the world.
So it's not just storytelling.
Not at all. They were creating what we'd now call astromythology to map the heavens and geomythology to map the earth. It was their way of processing everything from seismic instability to really complex human mental health patterns.
And the sources for this are just brilliant.
In
We've pulled
Homer's
together everything from
Odyssey, Odysseus
detailed
famously
archaeological reports out of
encounters
Turkey to
Polyphemus,
psychological studies that
a
link archetypes like
giant with
Narcissus
a
and Medea
single eye
to
in
modern
the
clinical
center of
conditions.
his forehead.
It's like a shortcut to understanding how their culture laid the groundwork for our entire scientific vocabulary.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I think we have to start with the biggest war of them all.
Yeah.
The conflict over Troy.
Of course. The epic of the Trojan War, immortalized by Homer, it's just so ingrained in our minds.
The 10-year siege, the abduction of Helen.
And the colossal wooden horse in the early 12th century BC. It's romantic, for sure, but historically, it's a brilliant cover story for real politics.
Because when you actually look at the location of Troy, in what's now northwestern Turkey, you realize pretty fast this war wasn't fought over a woman.
No, it was fought over cash flow and power. Simple as that.
Right.
The city controlled the Dardanelles, the Hellespont. That was the critical gateway for any maritime traffic going to and from the Black Sea.
So if you controlled Troy.
You controlled the trade, you controlled the money and the influence between Europe and Asia. The wars were fought for geopolitical dominance, not for romance.
And the physical evidence suggests Troy was. It was a fortress, especially during its strongest Bronze Age phase, Settlement 6.
Oh, absolutely. It was so fortified, it almost demanded a supernatural solution, like a giant horse, to explain how it could possibly fall.
You see that in the architecture.
You really do. Those citadel walls were staggering over 12 feet thick, 27 feet high, made of limestone, and then topped with mud brick.
Wow.
But the truly sophisticated part, they cut a defensive dish from the bedrock 1,200 feet south of the citadel. It was 12 feet wide and 6 feet deep.
So a direct assault was basically impossible.
Pretty much. The sheer scale of that defense explains why the Greeks had to invent a kind of magical solution. The physical reality of the city made it almost impregnable.
And this is where we get to pivot from the poetry back to actual history, because the archaeology gives us a really clear view of who was involved, thanks to one tiny discovery.
A small bronze seal.
Right.
And on that seal was an inscription in Luwian, which was the language of the powerful Hittite kingdom.
Yes.
Now, you pair that discovery with the Hittite clay tablets found in their capital, and they mention a political alliance with a ruler named Alexandru of Volusa.
Which scholars are pretty sure is Alexandros or Paris of Ilion, which is another name for Troy.
Precisely. So this means Troy was caught in this massive geopolitical vice. You have the Hittites in the east and the Ahiawans, the Achaeans, or Mycenaean Greeks in the west.
So it wasn't a simple feud, it was a huge east-west conflict.
A great power struggle. And it's
Sure.
all there in the diplomatic records.
It's just incredible to think that the single piece of writing found at Troy links the whole story to this. Now, our sources do confirm there were at least 2 major destructions there.
Yes, one seems to be from an earthquake in the 13th century BC, but the final one, the destruction of Settlement 7 around 1200 BC, that was clearly an attack.
And you can see it in the ground.
Oh yeah, that final layer of debris is telling. It's 5 feet deep in some places, just full of burned timbers, human skeletons, arrowheads, slingstones.
And the horse.
The famous horse. There's no evidence for it. The thinking is the attackers probably used a battering ram, maybe one that was decorated with a horse figure.
And the poets just mythologized it.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that the myth of the wooden horse isn't a lie. It's a metaphor for a brute force military strategy.
So we've mapped the external struggle of war. But what happens to the person who survives something like that? Let's take that idea of metaphor and turn it inward, and look at how myths mapped out human nature.
This is where it gets really fascinating because the Greeks were cataloging destructive behaviors long before psychology was, a formal discipline.
Okay, so take Narcissus. He's the origin figure for narcissistic personality disorder, MPD.
Right. And the myth details his fixation on his own image so intensely that it just ruins his life. He can't eat, he can't sleep.
And he has that classic lack of empathy. He's ridiculing everyone, demanding praise. The amazing thing isn't just that they noticed self-obsessed people, but that they created a model for that behavior.
A model for behavior that was disrupting the social fabric, which is basically what clinical diagnosis tries to do today.
You see that same pattern with Niobe.
Her story, where she has these grandiose
The
fantasies
only way
of
to
being superior,
permanently
of being
stop
better
the
than a goddess.
flow would be to
It ends
somehow
up with the
dry
tragic
up
loss of her
or
children.
cauterize
And modern
the
research connects this right.
source.
Narcissistic parents can put so much pressure on their kids, leading to anxiety, depression.
The Greeks understood that. They understood the generational damage of an unchecked ego.
So let's move from ego to trauma. Specifically, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You can see clear markers for this in Odysseus, after everything he went through in the Trojan War.
He shows key symptoms. He relives the trauma, vividly recalling the war in great detail, which is a lot like modern flashbacks.
But it's the avoidance that really stands out.
Yes. When he's recounting his stories, he often protests. He says something like, "It goes against my grain to repeat a tale told once."
He doesn't want to talk about it.
It's a clear attempt to avoid processing those painful memories. And then there's the hyperarousal, the suspicion.
Right, his paranoia. He's so distrustful of the goddess Calypso, he just assumes she has to be plotting something.
It aligns perfectly with PTSD. And you have to remember, with the constant wars between the city-states in ancient Greece, they were seeing this all the time. They were essentially mapping the struggles of their returning veterans.
Which brings us to maybe the most intense figure of all, Medea, often seen through the lens of unmanaged rage and borderline personality disorder, or BPD.
She shows that extreme impulsivity. She flees her home with Jason, kills her own brother to help them escape.
And that profound fear of abandonment, that's a classic hallmark of BPD. It comes out as this possessiveness, this obsession with Jason.
And the climax of her story is just a total inability to regulate these incredibly intense emotions. Jason's betrayal sends her into a rage that ends with her murdering his new wife and her own children. It's this awful demonstration of destructive impulsivity.
But I have to ask about the context. You noted that in ancient Greece, her actions were often seen as an issue with femininity, not a mental condition.
That's a crucial point. It really shows the limitation of their early models.
So they weren't trying to diagnose her.
I think they clearly observed the dangerous, unpredictable pattern, the impulsivity, the rage, but they didn't have the framework to call it a psychological condition, so they defaulted to a social explanation.
Really?
But the power of these myths is that they gave us the first language to even talk about this kind of toxic behavior, the kind we still struggle to define today, even if their first explanation was flawed.
That's a perfect transition from the inner world to the outer one. Let's shift to how the Greeks explained the physical subterranean world. We're talking about geomythology now.
Right. And a huge part of Greece is what's called karst terrain. It's a landscape made of soluble limestone.
And when limestone dissolves, it creates some very specific features.
Exactly. Caves, sinkholes, underground rivers. And the ancients developed this incredibly keen observational awareness of these things.
They even had names for them. The flooded plains were the pulgae. The deep sinkholes, the chasms, those are the Barathron.
Yes, the Katavathra, a place where water or people could just plunge into the earth. And those spiraling currents, the whirlpools, they called them the dino.
So when you know that vocabulary.
The material plausibility for the underworld, for Hades and Tartaros, just becomes obvious.
The geography of the underworld wasn't just invented out of thin air. It was a map of the landscape they saw every day.
Precisely. The fact that rivers would literally disappear underground was central to their model. Writers like Strabo and Pliny noted rivers like the Alpheus flowing into a barathrum and then re-emerging miles away.
I read they even proved this sometimes.
They did, by throwing things in or using dye tracing and seeing it pop up somewhere else. To them, those disappearing rivers were the Styx and the Cocytos, leading to the realm below.
So Tartaros itself, what Homer called the deepest gulf, yawning beneath the ground. That was a real place, a terrifying sinkhole.
Absolutely. And this made the heroic descent seem plausible. When you read about Heracles going to retrieve Cerberus from Hades, the stories often use local karst chasms, a chasma, as the actual entry point.
Like the site near Hermione, which was believed to be a shortcut to Hades.
Their maps of the afterlife were based on observable geology.
It's remarkable how much of this ancient mapping still exists today,
In the
especially
ancient
in our
Greek
scientific
city
language.
of
Let's talk about the sky for a
Hierapolis,
minute.
in
Astromythology.
modern-day
The Greeks
Turkey,
were, in a way,
there was a
precursors
site
to modern
known as
astronomy, and
Pluto's
their naming
Gate,
system was brilliant.
or the
It
Plout.
connected a god's nature to a planet's observed behavior.
So Mercury was named for Hermes, the messenger god, because it has the fastest journey across the sky.
Exactly. And Jupiter was Zeus, the supreme god, because it's the largest planet.
Mars being Ares, the god of war, wasn't just because it's red.
No, it was also the most erratic and intense of the inner planets. It fit the god of unpredictable conflict. And Saturn was Cronus, the titan of time, because of its incredibly slow journey.
And that influence just exploded from there.
It's staggering. Something like 63% of cataloged astronomical bodies related to Greek astromythology are tributes. The moons of Jupiter, for instance, are named after the lovers or children of Zeus.
We see that same kind of symbolic naming in our daily technology, too. I mean, everyone knows what a Trojan horse virus is.
It's a direct reference, infiltration by something that looks harmless.
And it just pervades science in general.
Oh, completely. In chemistry, you have elements like titanium for the Titans, promethium for Prometheus, the giver of fire. It gives these complex, abstract concepts a memorable human story.
And, of course, the Achilles heel. That metaphor is used everywhere in science and engineering to mean a critical vulnerability. These myths became a universal shorthand.
Okay, so let's finish by tying all of this together. Geography, myth, archaeology, back in Crete with the story of Theseus and the Minotaur.
The Minotaur and the Labyrinth. We know the labyrinth, which is technically a single path, not a branching maze, is connected to the huge, complex palace of Knossos.
Right. And the sheer size and complexity of that Minoan structure, for Bronze Age people from small villages, it would have been bewildering. It was labyrinthine.
A literal maze of bureaucracy and power.
And the Minotaur itself, that half-man, half-bull hybrid, it might have been inspired by Minoan bull-leaping frescoes.
Where the acrobats momentarily become one with the bull during the leap.
A terrifying mix of human and beast. But the critical part of the myth is its physical impact. It lived underground, and when it bellowed, the earth shook.
And that lines up perfectly with the geology.
Perfectly. Crete sits on a highly active subduction zone, a tectonic plate boundary that causes frequent, significant earthquakes. The Minotaur wasn't a monster. It was the personification of constant, unpredictable seismic activity.
The terrifying sound of the earth shifting, given a name and a story.
Exactly.
That is a phenomenal synthesis to end on. We've seen how Greek mythology wasn't just entertainment. It was a foundational framework. It provided geopolitical explanations at Troy, psychological archetypes like Odysseus, and geographical maps of the underworld.
And the fact that we still use this mythology in our modern scientific naming is an acknowledgement that exploration always starts with human imagination and storytelling. It lets us process the unknown by fitting it into a familiar narrative.
So what stands out to you? I mean, consider this. If the Greeks successfully encoded their geology and their trauma into these stories, how many other mythologies around the world might contain similar observational wisdom, a kind of mythoscience, just waiting to be rediscovered and mapped onto what we know today? That's a deep dive for another day.